Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again with Sam Silverstein for another episode. Welcome back, Sam.
Hey, Tom, how are you today?
Good. Sam, we don't often talk about current events on this podcast, but one came up last week that I really wanted to talk to you about, and that was an FAA report around the most recent series of safety failures at Boeing. And Sam, this is not the crashes of 2018, 2019, where there were 346 lives lost. But in my mind, this report was even more damning than the original FAA report. It pointed out that the FAA panel found that management oversight of employees responsible for investigative duties could potentially compromise safety and lead to retaliation. The survey showed that many Boeing employees did not know how to flag potential safety issues or did not trust the Speak Up program the company put in place. Following the two crashes I talked about, employee interviews revealed a distrust in the anonymity of the Speak Up program, and employees preferred, I think, to report safety issues to their manager, but they were still afraid to do that. And even in those sentences, there's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to let you start where you want to on this one.
This is a handful. And you and I had conversations back in 2018 and 2019 about the 737 MAX crash issue and what was going on and the way that the culture had migrated when Boeing actually acquired McDonnell Douglas, because it really goes back. And fundamentally, there's a problem with the culture at Boeing. Now, I'm not inside. I'm not interviewing people. We haven't used our culture audit, which is a powerful tool that really tells us everything going on inside of a culture. We haven't used that on Boeing. I don't have that information. But from the outside looking in, these problems occur when people are afraid. They don't trust leadership. They haven't been trained properly. There's all sorts of things getting in the way from creating a space, an environment that people thrive in, that they want to do their best, that they're excited to share what they find, to communicate. And the reality is that people should be rewarded for finding possible safety issues, not retaliated against. And I think that's in the corner as well.
Sam, in addition to the fear of retaliation and the reluctance to even speak up, it struck me we rarely see a line which reads, employees did not know how to flag potential safety issues. I would classify that as training. And is training on safety issues something that should be a part of culture, or in your opinion?
Training on anything should be a part of how you operate. You want your people to operate at the highest possible level. I don't care if you're a teller at the bank or you're putting rivets in on an aircraft that thousands of lives are dependent on. And so, of course, training should be important. But here's the question I have is, this is not rocket science, even though it is Boeing. We know that you have to train people. So either someone's neglecting or someone's purposefully leaving it out. And whoever that is, you have to eliminate them from the culture. And you have to, if you define your culture and you know what your culture, what you want it to be, and we can do that. We do that with leaders all the time. What do you want your culture to be? And when you define that, if people are not living the culture, if people are not contributing to the culture, if people are not holding up their end of the culture, why would you let them stay? And the thing that always comes back to me is I start thinking they're worried about their stock price this quarter. But that doesn't make sense either, because when you're paying fines, when you're paying penalties, when you're paying lawsuits, when there's a turnover at the gate, that's costing you millions upon millions of dollars. That's not helping your stock price. And so it's always been shown that a better culture leads to a better organization and a better bottom line. So I would think that by now, leadership would step up and take the reins strong in hand and make culture their single most primary focused item.
Sam, we had a academic study of whistleblower reports, and I talked to the author, I interviewed the author, and he said, frankly, he was stunned to find that it wasn't whistleblower reporting, although that's a part of it. It was what he called a speak up culture. And by that, he meant employees who were willing to raise their hand and speak up, and then the information went to an appropriate level of compliance or HR or other department for a triage, for an investigation. The reporter was kept in the loop. There was an absolute prohibition against retaliation, and a decision was made to act or not act based upon the reporter's information. But whatever that decision was, it was communicated back to the reporter. And he called that a culture of speak up, because all of those were in place. And what he found was there was, and this was U.S. public companies, there was a material difference in fines and penalties. And that's, accounting language for 5%. But even more important was something you raised. Employees were invested more in the corporation and spoke up to improve the corporation. So having that culture really leads to not just less fines and penalties, but a better run corporation, and at the end of the day, more profitable.
All right, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Let's break this down. Why would somebody not be willing to speak up? Fear.
Or
Why
not know how.
Oh, fear or not know how? Well, I think most adults today know how to open their mouth and speak up. And I think most people that are working on an aircraft probably know the difference between something that looks right and something that looks wrong. Let's take those assumptions. If that's the case, why would somebody have fear for speaking up?
Retaliation or ostracizing.
Experience. Some people have been retaliated against. People have been ostracized. People have been run out of the company. And so who does that? Leadership does that. Or leadership condones it. Or leadership doesn't know about it. And if leadership doesn't know about it, I'm going to take the position they're not doing their job. Because if I don't know what's important to you as my leader, if I'm going against what's important to you as my leader, first of all, I can't believe that's going to stay a secret all that long. Second of all, when you find out, you should show me the door, like within 5 minutes. That's tantamount to lying at that point. So there is a history of retaliation that creates fear. And somehow you have to move past that. And I don't know what their policies and practices are. Maybe there needs to be put a bounty on it. If you find something that's wrong, if you find a safety issue, we're going to pay you. If you want a culture, if you want to speak up culture, if you want a culture where people are going to open up and communicate, they must feel safe, they must feel valued, and they must feel like what they contribute is heard. Those are the three things. So create an environment where people feel safe, where they feel valued, and they are heard, which means action is taken on what they're sharing.
Sam, there's another part to this matter that I really would like to explore with you that we've had a chance to visit on. And it's essentially not that they're too big to fail. They're the only major U.S. aircraft manufacturer. So from both a government perspective on the military side, but equally importantly on the civilian side, America has to have one of the world's largest airplane manufacturers. And if we assume that, we can't enforce penalties that's going to put them out of business. That is unacceptable to both the government and the civilian realm of the U.S. I don't want to ask you how we influence them, but how can Boeing change without the hammer of a financial penalty or big bat over their head?
Yeah, a penalty which just gets rolled in prices of future products and people like you and me end up paying for. That's a great question. And ultimately, the difference I find between organizations with great cultures and organizations with cultures that don't quite match up, it always comes down to senior leadership. How bad do they want it? Do they know what they believe? Is there clarity? Now, when I say do they know what they believe, if you tell me you believe in a high quality product, but you're not putting one out, I'm going to say you don't believe in it, because my dad always taught me actions speak louder than words. In this type of situation, no, you don't want to run a company like Boeing out of business. But at some point, someone with knowledge of what needs to be done needs to have enough influence in the situation where requirements are put down, mandates are made, that certain check boxes have to be checked, certain goals have to be met. You're going to almost going to have to interfere with the operation of the business. If they can't get it right, does that mean the government should step in and get it right? I don't know that I have a lot of confidence in that. So if the leader, if the CEO isn't going to step up, then who is? And Calhoun, is he going to step up and do it? That's what it's going to come down to. And quite frankly, investors need to be more worried about stock price today and be focused on what this organization is going to be like in the long term, because that's what a sustainable high performance culture that prioritizes people, all people, employees, clients, the whole thing. That's what it's going to produce, is a long-term bottom line that's going to be brighter and is going to pay the rewards that the investors are going to want to have.
Sam, I think we would both recognize Boeing as, if not a multinational, a huge U.S. corporation. If that CEO makes that decision, whether he makes it himself, whether the board says it, whether chairman of the FAA, whether the president of the United States says, you have to change your culture, and he agrees to do, how would you advise him to start?
An organization of that magnitude, not just size, but geographic footprint, it's not simple. It's not easy. It is simple, I should say. It's simple in what needs to be done, but it's not easy to execute it. And I recognize that. You always start with measuring where you are. You always start with doing an analysis of what exactly is going on now. And when you measure your culture, then you can see the strengths, the weaknesses, the gaps, and the opportunities, and then you go after it. From there, you define the culture the way that you want it. If the culture's been defined, but it's not achieving, then you need to put significant resources behind the training and education of each employee till you get to the point where people realize that here, everything emanates from our culture. And unless you put the culture at the center of the conversation each and every day, each and every meeting, it'll never be the driving force you want it to be.
Can a CEO, I know a CEO can say that, if a CEO does that, can he commit to changing the culture of an entire huge organization like Boeing?
Yes, but it's going to take time. You start, it's like the old, when's the best time to dig a well? 20 years ago. When's the next best time to dig a well? Right now. So dig the well, start the process, have a plan, have a team in place, have a budget that's allocated to this. Make culture a part of every conversation, any meeting that people have. The concept of culture needs to come up. The values that define that culture need to be discussed. It needs to be a way of life, and everyone needs to come on board. And anyone that doesn't come on board, you allow them to go elsewhere. And you replace them with someone who does want to contribute to the culture, who's not going to take shortcuts. And no, it's not going to change this week or this month. You will see shifts this year, but it could be 3 to 5 years before you get it where you want it. But if you want to get it someplace, you start today.
You and I visited a lot over the past several years, and I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Can America afford not for its only large airplane manufacturer not to have a culture which embraces and celebrates safety?
No, it cannot afford to have that type of organization. But just remember, tough love. When you're raising children, there comes a time when you have to cut someone off. There might come a time where maybe there's a new organization that comes along. Maybe some of these contracts, maybe there's new technology, maybe a startup in the aerospace business that gets a boost from education world, the government, or whatever. We get them going and we start them and maintain them based on the concept that they're going to, project one is culture, project two are the products. And maybe that's what it takes. And maybe Boeing needs that competition. We created this problem. We let Boeing and McDonnell Douglas merge. We let these companies come together. And so now we've backed ourselves into a corner. But if you don't take action, you're never going to get the end result that you're really trying to get.
Sam, I can't think of a better way for us to end this podcast. I look forward to continuing this discussion.
Thank you. These difficult conversations are important because we need to work through these challenges. We need to build better organizations. It's good for everyone.